A relationship with the right referral partner could be a game changer for any B2B company. So what if you could reverse engineer these relationships at a moment's notice? Start a podcast, invite potential referral partners to be guests on your show, and grow your referral network faster than ever. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show. Welcome back to B2B Growth. I'm Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. I'm joined today by Tom Fishburne. He is the founder of Marketoonist, a keynote speaker, and the author of Your Ad Ignored Here. Tom, how are you doing today, sir?
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yes, you and I had a great conversation about humor the other day. We were laughing about one of your cartoons that was actually a little bit about podcasting that I found funny. And that really relays well into the topic for today's episode in talking about humor in B2B. Before we dive straight into that, though, I would love for you to share with listeners who aren't as familiar with you a little bit about your background and what you and the now team at the Marketoonist are up to these days.
Absolutely. Well, I've come from both a background as a cartoonist and also somebody who has worked in marketing for a long time. And it took me a while, but I eventually put those two things together. Initially drawing cartoons about my marketing day job, where I worked consumer packaged goods companies and technology companies. And then eventually I started to get all these requests to see how I could create cartoons to help other companies tell their stories. And so 9 years ago, my wife and I started a business focused explicitly on that, using cartoons as a medium for communication and how brands can help have a sense of humor, both externally in marketing, but also increasingly we're doing internal culture change types of projects as well.
I love it. So one of the things you and I were talking about a little bit offline as we dive right into the tactics here of humor in B2B is the role that empathy plays. You know, so many folks in sales and marketing today are talking about, and I would agree with this, that empathy is such an important characteristic for both B2B salespeople and marketers to have today, as so much of what we do gets done by automated things and AI and those sorts of things. Empathy is something that can't be replicated by robots, at least not yet or anytime in the near future. So just in the landscape of things and how empathy plays a role in humor, tell us a little bit about the correlation you see there, Tom.
Absolutely. I realized early on that oftentimes pain points were my biggest leaping off point for humor. When I was drawing a weekly cartoon about my marketing day job, something would happen to me as a marketer. I would draw a cartoon about it, and then suddenly all these other marketers would see the cartoon, and they would send me these notes saying, "Oh my gosh, that's so funny! You totally get what this world is like." And it was a cathartic experience for both of us. There was a sort of a sense of belonging in that we're all going through this together. And when we eventually expanded this into a business, I continued to focus on pain points as that leaping off point, partly because that's where the jokes were, but also I realized over time that in working with a company to create cartoons for their audience, if we had a clear understanding of what the pain points were that their audience experienced, there was a form of empathy in that, and understanding, putting yourself in your customer's shoes, and you have to really put yourself in your customer's shoes to a pretty extreme degree to then mine that place for humor. But if you're laughing collectively at the situation, you're not laughing at something, you're laughing, together. It's a bonding sort of fellowship and laughing together at an experience. That I think is something that an audience is very receptive to, because it feels like this brand gets me, and they understand what I'm going through. And so that's usually the leaping off point for a lot of our projects. Some of our projects are very niche. They relate to audience segments I don't have personal background or experience with. And so a lot of the process is really researching the audience, sometimes interviewing them, finding out what things they find funny or relating to pain points that they go through. And then in creating cartoons about those pain points, it shows that the brand gets them. And then it also naturally sets up the brand as a potential solution to some of those pain points. Mm-hmm. So we actually did a project not too long ago with Lenovo software, and a lot of the focus they wanted to play with involved the struggles of going through digital transformation. And so we created all these cartoons about the crazy things companies are doing to try to go through a period of digital transformation. And it ended up becoming something that people really responded to such a degree that Lenovo was getting requests for the cartoons to then send to individuals so they could hang them up in their offices. And so Lenovo ended up creating a mechanism to make that easier. They set up a microsite where anybody could go to their microsite, pick their favorite cartoon out of this collection of 10 that we created, and request that cartoon on a coffee mug or a mouse pad. And Lenovo would just send it to them for free because, in a way, if somebody responded that much to the cartoon and they wanted to actually have this cartoon kind of in their workplace, then Lenovo wanted to make that happen. As again, this feeling like, hey, we're all in this together. We're all trying to go through digital transformation, and humor created this sort of bonding effect.
That is phenomenal. The thing that I try to correlate there in my mind is that would be like someone responding to some content that a marketing team put out and said, hey, can I get a really nice copy of that ebook to put up on my shelf? Or can I get that white paper to frame in my office? That's not going to happen, right? But it happens
can you sign
because...
this infographic?
Right. Can you sign this? I love that. That's even better. Your mind went another step, and it was even better. Why we leave the humor to you, Tom? That's exactly why, right there. But I think that logical step of thinking about, would that happen with a normal piece of content that wasn't focused on engaging at a human-to-human level based on humor? It allows for more engagement, deeper engagement. And on that point, you talked a lot about the emotional connection to the brand. This is a brand that gets me. They understand me. And you talked a little bit there about interviewing people in the target audience to get to know them so that you could write something that would be funny. I would love for you to share with marketers out there that might be listening to this saying, I would love to create content that is funny for our audience, but maybe we're still working out our messaging, or I'm trying to define our ICP, or I'm new to this industry. I've been in B2B marketing for a while, but now I'm in a new industry as far as, the audience that we serve. What are some of the things that you've done tactically to draw out those little nuggets to find the key things that you can use humor to exploit based on the audience that you're trying to reach?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And I felt like I had to break some of my own marketing training in this process, because you started off by talking about how you're new to a team. You're reading all these, features and benefit statements, all of the typical things that brands have to describe what they do. And so much of it is directed from the point of view of the brand and the products and the features and benefits and tech specs and all that kind of stuff. And then if you do have a glimpse into the customer that you're reaching, very often you have these persona decks, which can often feel oftentimes I've done a number of cartoons on this as well, because sometimes they're just projected fiction of coming up with, this person likes Game of Thrones and they have a Jack Russell Terrier, and how does that actually help you sell what you're trying to sell?
Right.
And so I found that the best tool in my experience is to try to get out of the marketing ivory tower and put yourself in a place where you're directly interacting with customers at a real level, having real conversations. I think it's really important for marketers to go on sales calls and to just get out into the field as much as possible, because some of the best insights that I come across to develop cartoons come not from what's officially published, but from an aside that's kind of mentioned at the end of a conversation. And you only have those moments if you really put yourself into that position to be there when those happen. Usually, it's funny, some of the best ideas that we end up coming with for campaigns are often involve some sort of inside joke that customers are already telling amongst themselves. And so they're like, oh my gosh, this is what we're going through, and this is an experience we're having. And then for me as a cartoonist on the team, I try to spot that, notice when that moment's happening, and think, how can we exaggerate or bubble this up into something that will be relevant to a larger group of people? But it's so much of it involves the active observation and listening. And I feel like we're as marketers, we're getting so much more data driven, which is essential and very important. But I think we have to marry that being data driven with really having an opportunity to put ourselves where the messy, qualitative unstructured, nonlinear customer interactions come, because often that's where the real sparks of insight can come from.
In B2B, sales and account management communications happen via email. You might be familiar with email tracking. Sending an email and knowing if the person on the other end opened it or not. The problem is most tools fail when you send an email to multiple recipients. Oftentimes you get a message that says someone opened your email without knowing exactly who. Today's sponsor, Focus.io, helps sales and account management professionals with per-recipient email tracking, so you can identify who actually opens your emails or clicks the links that you send. Focus.io brings a ton of other features to Gmail and G Suite too, like automated follow-up to leads who don't reply, integration with Salesforce and other CRMs, bulk email campaigns, and much more. All of this without ever leaving Gmail. Sound like things that could make you more productive? We have an exclusive 25% lifetime discount for B2B growth listeners. To get your discount and learn why so many inside sales teams love Focus.io, head over to Focus.io/growth. That's V as in Victor, OCUS.io/growth. Just think Focus, but with a V. When you sign up, you'll enjoy a 25% lifetime discount on select plans. All right, let's get back to the show.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's fantastic advice. On another show that we produce, SmartBug on Tap, Jen Spencer, VP of Sales and Marketing over at SmartBug Media, was talking about the value of call recording software and diving into that for marketers. So many sales leaders are looking at solutions like Chorus.ai and others that let you record your sales calls and then coach your reps. But there is just a treasure trove of information there for marketers, even if they're not physically joining sales calls or going out on meetings. Sometimes those can be best, especially if you can, visit customer offices, you see things and you pick up on those inside jokes or things. But, a step in that direction might just be, if you are a marketer, request access to your sales team's call recording software, whatever that might be, Chorus or another, and then, start digging, right? So I think that's very tactical advice. And I love how you said, you had to break some of your marketing training to do it. Now, we've talked a lot about empathy here so far, Tom. One of the other things that I know you're a big proponent of is serial storytelling and using humor in that way. We're obviously big believers in that a serial format creates, engagement over the long term with a brand. That's why we're passionate about podcasting, because people listen and finish the episodes, and when they subscribe, they tend not to unsubscribe. So how can you lean into kind of that serial storytelling framework, specifically with humor? I touched on it with podcasting, but obviously it's not specific to that. Tell us a little bit about, how that can come into play as marketers think about humor over the long haul, not just an individual campaign or a cartoon or whatever the case might be.
Absolutely. Well, I think that so often part of the art of humor involves an act of simplification, of trying not to cram too much into it. And I feel like as marketers, very often we try to look at one piece of creative and think, I want to put the kitchen sink in there. I want to say everything I could possibly say. And anybody who sees this has to get everything all at once. And that can inevitably suck the life out of that piece of creative and can certainly suck the humor out of it. And so I found the benefit of working in a serial medium like cartoons is that I don't have to tell every story every time. And actually, there's a real benefit to having a serial medium where the audience is looking forward to the next installment. So if you made them laugh with one piece, they want to see what you put out the next time. I've been publishing a weekly cartoon about marketing now for 17 years, every week for 17 years. And my email newsletter open rates are over 40% for a weekly newsletter. And it's largely because people laugh and when it comes in the inbox, they kind of like, oh, I know this is going to be there. It's anticipatory, and I want to see what the next installment is. And so I think that setting up that expectation that that we're going to publish once a week, and that people really look at the zone of I've subscribed to this, I want to see what the next installment is, can help any type of marketing. And it creates this great flywheel effect where people, you have increased value to things you've already created, and then there's the extra value going forward that people kind of look out. You're able to break through the clutter because people are looking out for the next installment. Our longest running campaign right now has been with a workforce management software company called Kronos. And they've been publishing a weekly cartoon now for 9 years. Every week for 9 years, a new cartoon. And it's allowed them to, like I said earlier, not cram everything into one piece of content, but they can also get specific across all of their different industry verticals they play in to find humor in, factory environments or retail environments or healthcare environments, and go deep on those stories and find inside jokes that they're allowed to do because they don't have to have everything writing on each one individually. So I find both a lot of freedom in the serial medium, but also a lot of power in the serial medium because it allows you to build up a big story over time. And then also the other benefit I should say is if something's working, you can riff on that and expand it, and you learn from your audience as you go, and your content gets better over time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen that. We had the pleasure and privilege of, now getting past the 1,000th episode milestone on this podcast, and just seeing how far we've come and how well we have been able to understand what our audience is looking for, what our guests want to talk about, those sorts of things over time have just sharpened that sword that much more. You talk about the benefits of serial storytelling in the anticipation, the looking forward to it, holding attention, as you put it, breaking through all the clutter and the noise out there. The other thing is, one thing for me personally, my two kids are really into the Calvin and Hobbes books and the Garfield collections. It gives you the ability to then, okay, you hit 1,000 episodes or 450 cartoons or whatever the case might be. Okay, I can package this now into a different format, and people are going to look forward to that as well because they know the quality has been there over time. So it gives you different ways to package your content, whether that's a cartoon or a podcast or a video series, whatever the case might be. So as you were talking about that, I was like, oh, that's a real world story from my life right now.
Yeah, I love that. That's great.
So let's talk a little bit about the impact internally, the cultural impact that you've seen with B2B brands on their internal culture by leaning into humor as, hey, this is the way that we do things. It's not just something that happens over here in marketing, but it's more of a shift in their overall culture. Talk to us about that, because I think that's not necessarily something that comes to mind. Okay, we want to be engaging, we want to be funny with our prospective customers, but you see it as a broader impact on the business rather than just marketing to potential customers, right?
Absolutely. I think more and more brands are expected to market from the inside out in many ways. And I think that we're increasingly asked to drop some of the silo walls so that you have different parts of your organization. They all ultimately play into the marketing process. They all ultimately play into the B2B sales process. So to have all the functional groups kind of aligned is increasingly important. And it's very transparent when brands aren't working that way. And I find that increasingly over time, I've been asked to work on projects where the cartoons can help companies talk about things that are otherwise hard to talk about, and to cultivate in a sense of humor internally that ends up shining through their entire culture, and it allows different silos to work better together, and it allows ultimately that then flows through to end customer interactions. I had an opportunity the last few months to work with two professors at Stanford Business School on a new course they're teaching that's all about the power of humor in business. And they've really picked up on this key principle that very often our human senses of humor kind of ramps up into the point that we're in our early 20s when we enter the workforce. And then they say we hit what's called a humor cliff, that we suddenly feel less comfortable laughing at work, having fun with ourselves at work, and then it takes a while to then build it up again. And they're trying to teach this at Stanford Business School as a real powerful business tool to help organizations cultivate creativity, to allow them to be more nimble, talk about things that have to change, to expose the elephants in the room and all that kind of stuff. And so I've been working with a lot of different companies on that. One organization recently is a consulting company called InnoSights, and we had worked at one point on creating cartoons to help illustrate their culture. And for April Fool's Day, somebody somebody inside their own organization created a mock version of those cartoons, kind of making fun of aspects of their culture they wanted to change. And a light bulb went off for them and for me. They ended up bringing me in again to look at their culture with a more of an eye for, hey, what kind of things should we not do as much anymore? What kind of things are unhealthy for the culture we want to build? And so I interviewed a whole bunch of people in the culture, and we ended up creating a whole bunch of cartoons, kind of mocking aspects of the culture they wanted to move away from. And I just went to visit them a couple of weeks ago, and they now have the cartoons all over the office. They've had these big work sessions to work through these issues, but cartoons have really been a teaching aid and a thought starter to help talk about aspects of the culture they want to change. And it was a moment for me that really got me thinking about the power of humor internally, whatever way you find it. In this case, it started with an April Fool's joke they did internally, but how do you cultivate the sense of humor that your organization might already have in pockets to then use it as a way to evolve and adapt, which all of us need to do all the time.
Mm-hmm. I love that story. It's just, so meta that an April Fool's joke turned into more humor about internal and yeah. All these sorts of things. So I love that, Tom. The way I hear you talking about, there are really 4 benefits that people can walk away from this conversation by using humor in their marketing in B2B. We talked about developing more empathy for your prospective customers. In that process, number 2 would be better understanding your target market. 3, another way to create serialized content that your audience actually looks forward to, and maybe even ask you for a signed copy to put up on your wall if you're as good as Tom here. And then the internal cultural impacts, being able to talk through tough topics, being able to have better change management within the organization. A lot of things that I don't think necessarily straight come to mind. So I love the way that you've unpacked those here for us today, Tom. If anybody would like to stay connected with you, follow your content, sign up for your newsletter, sounds like it's one that a lot of our listeners should definitely be signed up for. What's the best way for them to reach out or stay connected with you, Tom?
Absolutely. So the center of everything is Marketoonist.com. I have all of my cartoons for the last 17 years there. You can sign up for a newsletter there. And then through all the social channels on Marketoonist or Tom Fishburne, I'm kind of in most places across all of those, and you can find all the cartoons there as well. And I generally write an article to go along with each cartoon every week to kind of unpack some of the things that inspired it.
Fantastic. Well, Tom, this has been a great conversation, just like our last one, but glad we got to share this one with listeners. And I think you shared some very tactical things that folks can think about and go and apply in using humor in their marketing today. So thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me. Really enjoyed the conversation.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big 3, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.